Welcome to Nelson Road Tree Farm, and it's located off of Highway 9, north of Acme and south of Deming, kind of in the very foothills of the Mount Baker Cascade area.
When I was between 18 and 20, I spent a couple of years logging in British Columbia. So I had some familiarity with the logging industry, and I decided as a retiree it would be a good thing to plant some trees. So as Kaz said, I said, well, we'll find 20 acres so I can put her around in it, and eventually ran across this property here. At that time, it was what you would call marginal pasture. It was full of weeds and reed canary grass and stuff like that.
Blackberries.
Blackberries. Before I bought it, I consulted with John Gillies, who was with the NRCS and Boyd Norton, about what kind of things would do well on the property. So after sort of getting the nod from them that it would be a place you could grow some trees, I bought it. When I started, my idea was, well, I'm going to plant a variety of trees. Native trees principally, Douglas fir, red cedar, yellow cedar, Japanese larch, spruce, river birch. I bought 5,500 trees, and I hired a crew to plant them because I was still busy unretiring. I came back in about June. You couldn't see any trees at all, and when you went to look for them, they were mostly chewed off by voles or rabbits. The survival rate for trees out of that 5,500 was such there were about 800 left. And I was still talking to John Gillies about doing this, and he was quite interested. And we were sitting in his office one day and looking in a catalog and saw these blue tubes. And we decided, well, that looks like a positive thing because you could see that it would probably protect the tree from the voles and the rabbits. And so the next year, planted trees in protected areas, put every tree on a blue tube, and the success rate was about 99%.
The tree farm is about 70 acres, and about 40 acres of that is in the CREP program, which is about the two waterways that are on here. We've got Black Slough on the east and No Name Slough on the west, and both of those are tributaries into the South Fork of the Nooksack. And at least the Black Slough is definitely used as a migration path for coho salmon going upstream for spawning.
The whole of the property varies in elevation by only a foot or two. And because of that, in the high water table, it was difficult to get plants started in some areas. And so we got a permit, or permits, to undertake what's called de-leveling, which is simply making, with a backhoe, a scoop in a mound and planting the tree on the mound. That turned out to be quite successful in establishing cedar, yellow cedar, and spruce in areas which otherwise would have been quite difficult.
Well, we've been lucky here in that Dave is kind of an IT professional, so we've mounted motion detection cameras on the bridge, and we've seen bear and cougar, coyote, otters, river otters, opossum, bobcat, elk, deer, occasional flyover bald eagle, harriers. Because of the bridge cam, we've actually been able to see some pairs of owls maybe this year. We get lots of woodpeckers.
One of the really cool animals we have on the property is the Oregon spotted frog. It's an endangered species, and we identified quite a few frogs on the property and sent off some pictures to identify them and make sure that it was indeed the Oregon spotted frog. And they identified that it was the Oregon spotted frog and have come out many years since doing egg mass surveys and validated that there's a continually growing population of Oregon spotted frog here along Black Slough, which is great.
Every owner has different objectives for the land and different kinds of tree farms. Bob's is really unique. Instead of inheriting a forest or buying a forest, he bought a field and made it into a forest. He was kind of a pioneer in doing this. Some of the things he talks about as far as the blue tubes and the de-leveling, those are pretty new techniques, and now they're used common in restoration projects. So as he'll tell you, it's a lot of work, but he learned how to deal with it. He was innovative, and he was very, very persistent. And that's kind of what it takes to be a good tree farmer, be persistent.
We've turned the property over to Robin and Hannah, our two daughters, who share it equally. And they have Dave as a slave who will look after it. So our legacy is that. What they do with it will be up to them. So what I would hope is that it exists as a healthy forest.
Bob always joked that when to harvest and how to harvest would be someone else's problem because he would no longer be around. And since that time, the rules and regulations protecting the riparian buffers around the waterways have changed and made harvesting to be a much more complex problem and challenge. And in its place, the conservation program, CREP, has provided offset to the costs of building the forest and growing the forest.
I think that our intent will be to find a way to keep it in conservation as is. I have no plans to harvest it all or sell it to somebody who would be doing that. Dad worked hard to make it what it is, and I'd like to keep that intent.